Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Audi Max and today's global lecture. My name is Chris Lubkeman, and I have the pleasure and the privilege of leading the Strategic Foresight Hub here at ETH Zurich, and I am your host for today's dialogue. The ETH Global Lecture Series is a platform where we like to bring remarkable people together, and we have 4 very remarkable people tonight, to discuss their personal projects, insights, interests, experiences, and expertise on contemporary topics. In addition to simply satisfying our curiosity to learn, we also hope that these dialogues will expand our perspectives so we can broaden our thinking, challenge our opinions, and make an even more meaningful contribution to society. Today, we're going to talk about a project which is very near and dear to me. It's a collaboration between the Zurich Ballet and ETH Zurich, the Butterfly Effect. It consists of 3 original pieces created for the Junior Ballet, which will premiere this Sunday. These stunning pieces were inspired by close interaction between all of those who you will see on stage, in addition to Professor Sonia Senevirata and the amazing larger creative team of the Zurich Ballet. No more spoilers. We're going to let the dialogue get into that. On stage today, there will be the world-renowned Cathy Marston, Zurich's ballet director and chief choreographer, Isun Rustem, internationally active British choreographer from Zurich, and Lucas Valente, the young Brazilian choreographer and dancer of the Zurich Ballet. And finally, joining us from Venice will be David Bresch, who is currently on sabbatical at Università Ca' Foscari, Venezia. And I'm sure I butchered that terribly, so sorry, David, I apologize. He's professor for weather and climate risks. So I'd like to welcome to the stage all 4 of our guests. Please join me on here. And hello, David. David's right there. You're right there. So hi, David. Welcome to. So our time together will be approximately 60 minutes. After Cathy, Lucas, Isun, David, and I spend some time talking, you're going to have a chance to also ask some questions. Now, we have some helpers who are going to have some cards. You can write some questions on a card, and I'll tell you when we're going to start doing that. And then we'll pass them up, and then I'll start getting to them. I can imagine, as you could imagine, I could talk with these 3, 4 for hours. So I'm going to have to discipline myself to make sure we have time for you to get some questions in as well. Are we ready?
Yes.
Thank you, Cathy, for the yes. So, Cathy, this project, how did it get started? The Butterfly Effect.
We met.
We met. Yes, we did.
We were introduced by one of my colleagues at the Opera House. And I think it's not the right thing to say. There should be some sort of deep and meaningful answer, but sometimes there's just a click. Mm-hmm. And I think in our case, we felt a click.
Yep.
And you talked to me about your project, Your Hour 2040, yep, which looks into, actually you described yourself as a futurist, and I hadn't heard that job description before. And that was interesting to me. And the more we got to talk, I thought, actually, I was looking for a theme or an umbrella to bring together the program I was imagining for our junior ballet. Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me as we were talking that the themes that you were bringing into the discussion would be perfect for these young people. So our junior ballet are 14 young dancers between the age of 18 and 22. And they come from all over the world and have different training. And they come here in Zurich. And for most of their 2 years with us, they perform with the main company. But every second year, we create a program especially for them. And it's intense and hard and challenging, but ultimately an amazing platform to see their talent in the spotlight. And so I wanted to find something that would be fitting for these young people. And what better than looking at the future and the near future and what they're going to be growing up and the world that their career will be launching into, essentially.
That's great, because the project's called Your 2040, and the whole mission there is to try to help instill a belief in a positive, pragmatic future, that we can, through our individual actions, all have a positive impact. And that was, I think, what resonated with you, especially when you were talking about the young generations are the one who will inherit what we do.
Yeah.
I think that's what resonated, and that's where the project gets started. And David Bresch, you're joining us from Venice. Hello, you're on this big screen up above.
Hello, you hear me like this?
Yeah, we can hear you. You're echoing beautifully, as if you're all the way from Venice. Very wavery, very watery. So it took you about 10 seconds to say yes when I asked you if you would be part of the project. Why did it take you so long?
You know, it's this typical thing. No, big thanks to you, Chris, for bringing us together. It was an immediate sparking thing to say, if this is an opportunity, I have to jump on it. Absolutely.
So what attracted you about the project?
As an original climate scientist, and then looking into policy, the economics of climate change, I felt it's always a challenge to reach new constituencies, people who really might make a difference. We as scientists cannot do, policymakers cannot, but we desperately need a society. And I felt this is yet another opportunity to engage with first a professional community, but especially also with their audience through means which I think can transform things in a different way than any type of speaking or reading can. So I was really intrigued by this opportunity. And also for me, that was the fascinating piece to learn how do pieces like choreographies, how do they emerge? How do they get developed? And what kind of a dialogue might help colleagues as they're on stage to further their thinking? And let's be honest, there's also an element in all altruism. There's an element of me learning something I could not unveil without having these conversations.
That's great, David. That's the perfect segue to Lukas. We had a 2-day workshop at Villa Hut, which is one of the properties of ETH Zurich, where we had a workshop in which David and Sonia Senevirata shared their outlook, their understanding of climate change. Share a little bit about those 2 days and the workshop with them.
That was very interesting.
That's a big
in
word.
many aspects. We basically were at this beautiful place, first of all, talking and discussing about those topics. And in our table, we were a collection of artists and scientists. And it's very interesting to see how our realities are, or our perspectives of the world are very different. On how we approach and how you observe certain topics. So if we're about to talk about a certain topic in our language, it feels like the scientific language is very different in our language. So it's very interesting to gather all this information and to hear all those ideas, problems, sometimes proposals on how we should approach that or not. And kind of take this inspiration and get this as a head start for our future projects.
And was there one aspect of those 2 days, or one graph, or one statement, or something that really stuck with you?
Many. For my creations, I really like to, before getting started creating anything, I really like to gather lots of information. And it felt that was for me the perfect start. Like this table work that I like to do, sit down, read lots of things about this topic, and then slowly start highlighting the parts of the topic that feel like they're the most important or the strongest peaks for me. So that felt like a very based start of a project for me.
Perfect. That's great. We'll come back. I want to come back to a little bit more. But Isan, what about you? What do you remember about those 2 days?
It was exhausting. It was fascinating, intense, overwhelming at times, because the stark reality is somewhat bleak. And to be relatively frank, the first day, it was really fascinating. I mean, I learned so much. I really, I'm quite embarrassed to say, faced with the facts, how
don't be embarrassed.
little I was aware of
absolutely.
the stark reality. And then came the stark reality in my own mind. I mean, the first day was we have been set this monumental, beautiful task. And then the question for myself was, well, how can we take something so distressing
It's so big. Let's just say so big.
and so big, and find a way to deal with that, and find a way to put that on stage, and find a way to deal with it. We can't change the world in a 20-minute piece at all. But what you can do is the task we were given. So it was really fascinating. The first day for me was overwhelming, and I struggled. And then the second day I was like, okay, how can we take this and make something fascinating? And I think it's really interesting, because we're three very different artists with different approaches. So it's so nice that from the same seed that has been planted, when all of you come and watch, you'll see there's three very different approaches, which I think is wonderful. Yeah,
That's great. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. So we've got interesting, fascinating, overwhelming. Kathy, and for your 2 days, what do you remember? How were they for you?
Gosh, it's a bit of a blur for me in my memory now, because it was a lot of specifics, a lot of numbers, graphs. And at one point, I started almost putting a filter on, because I was aware I wasn't there to be able to,
Regurgitate.
quote them back at you.
Exactly. Yeah.
What I was there for was to distill all of that stuff into something that I could work with as a choreography, or that I could choreograph. And I remember hope being a big word that was mentioned a lot. That really, because I think for the three of us, it was quite shocking, all of these, very bleak graphs and figures. And the scientists or your team saying, but there's hope. We really don't want this to come out seeming completely negative and no light at the end of the tunnel ever, impossible. And so I was trying to hold on to that as well. And then just to find a way that I could personally relate to it, because usually when I choreograph, I'm very often starting with a book, a piece of literature, a biography, a specific story. And I wanted to give myself the chance in this instance to create something that had a more open starting point, a more personal thing. So I was listening to all of the input and trying to filter it into my own, into myself. Like, how would I bring this back out in a ballet?
It's really great. And so if we think about, I'm going to come back to how each of you then use this in your methodologies. I'm really quite curious, because as you said, I had the privilege of being there on Saturday. Stunning pieces, all of them, and completely different. Right. And so I want to ask David, what were the 2 days like for you? I mean, you as a climate scientist, your job was to try to, and you look at risk, you look at the future. This is what you do professionally, constantly. How was it for you, those 2 days?
I mean, I think the start was relatively easy, because there's a couple fundamentals and couple things to just bring across and have a certain level of shared understanding what that all means. But then it got really fascinating when we talked about the role of trust, the emerging features. Well, how does a society deal with that, from the single individual through family, communities, and all kinds of levels, and then the opportunities you have in theater or dance specific to relate to this kind of mechanisms, not necessarily only really focus on climate and how complexity emerges, how you manage it, and who plays which role. Also, that was a key element I took more than probably before out of that. The role of the individual in crafting something which is bigger than the single person. And how you bring that across, it's all about communication, but it's also about what does on the receiver side really stay and what sticks and what motivates somebody to possibly change something. And to explore that. That was the fascinating piece, especially of the second day. So it brought us almost back to the absolute basics, how we engage as humans. And that was really intriguing.
I appreciate that. Thank you, David, because it's how you communicate and how you decide what you communicate. In many ways, this is, as a choreographer, this is what I understand you do. You're deciding how and what and why. So, Kathy, talk us through a little bit what you did. I know you've done many pieces since that workshop. This isn't the only thing you've worked on, all of you, I know that. But in regard to this project, how did your process go? And tell us kind of where it landed and how did the piece manifest for you?
So I became director of Ballet Zurich a year and a half ago, just a bit more now. And even before then, I felt this, but right now I feel more than ever that time is the most precious resource I have. I'm very conscious, I try to do big things with the company and with my life. And sometimes, of course, money is the key factor. Can we afford to do this project or do that? But more than anything, have we got time? And that's in the daily schedule with the dancers, also in my life. I've got 2 kids. Have I got time to go and do that with them and still be at the show that night? Or, all of that. Yeah. And that lack of time and trying to squeeze way too many things into every day makes me do stupid things sometimes. So I might do the quick option. It's not a daily thing, but take the plane instead of the train, or choose the thing that is not necessarily great for the environment or for our future, because it's the quickest, and I need to achieve all of these things. Yeah. And so I felt like time as a resource was something I wanted to talk about in the choreography, and that made me think of a piece of music that's been in the back of my head for a long time, called De Snelheid, which means velocity or speed in Dutch. It's by a Dutch composer called Louis Andriessen. And it's 17.5 minutes, and it's got this wood block. It's very percussive. It starts kind of fast and rhythmic, and it gets even faster and even more complex rhythmically. So the time between each note, so to speak, gets shorter, and more has to fit in, and the different events happen. So there's big booms and blasts of trumpet and so on. And it just gets increasingly more intense. And that felt like just a musical image of what I was feeling. So I thought, okay, this is the time for me to approach this piece. But at the end of it, it finishes in almost a burnout, really. And I wanted to have something then on the end of it that would capture this hope that I do feel, and that was so important to you all, David and everybody else, that was expressed and important to me too. And so there's another piece of music that I've loved for a long time called The Unanswered Question from Charles Ives. Yeah. And it's the opposite. It's a really slow, percussive, less piece. But again, with these events that happen from the brass instruments that state this unanswered question. And that felt to me to really be the right end. We have an unanswered question. We don't know what's going to happen. But it's very beautiful and calm in that unansweredness. So I decided to pick these 2 pieces of music. And I started dividing up the piece and wanted to, with our junior ballet, there's 14 dancers, create a sort of growth. So I gave myself a system. I started with a solo, it goes into a duet, a trio, quartet, quintet, etc. And then I added rules, because I like rules. So I thought, let's start with a real pure... So ballet began in a sphere. It all exists in this bubble. Everything's nice. There's a line, but it's not a greedy line. It all exists in a beautiful, satisfied circle. And over time, as ballets developed, we get greedy. We want our legs to get higher. And, something that used to be considered a nice line at 45 degrees became 90, and then up here. And now you're no good if you can't get over 180 degrees with your arabesque.
Ouch.
I'm no good.
I'm joking. I mean, but it feels like that sometimes. The line of ballet has become warped in the same way that I feel our approach to life has become warped and greedy. And so I said, okay, in the solo, we're only starting with demi-plie, which means you can just bend your knees a little bit, you can move along the floor, you can do an even port de bras. The next section, you can go to a big plie and so on. And so we slowly allowed ourselves to jump or go to the floor or cover more space or get higher legs. And so in a very abstract way, I'm trying to express, I guess what I feel is the greed that leads us to burn up the planet, to put it really bluntly.
Yeah. Not quite sure what to say to the last one there.
Well,
greed yet.
yeah.
But it's a beautiful, and now you describe that
Greed is the wrong word. It's a desire to have more, which I suppose is greed.
Yeah, greed, it is greed. No, greed's great. I mean, greed and envy are two extremely difficult emotions. I love the unanswered question. And David, I heard you expressed, and I saw you up there when she described that. Why were you grunting at that or grinning? What was your reaction?
I mean, I think because it's really this notion that we do pack always even more into something, and we probably miss. The more we pack, we condense things, the more we have this feel of emptiness, of missing something, missing out. And it's very hard as a single person to correct for that, because there's a societal context in which it's hard to separate from. And I think that was the great thing also in Villa Hut, to allow ourselves 2 days for that, to come back the next day, not with a new program, but with basically an open conversation to be continued. And that's something probably also to take away, to allow ourselves for that space to reflect on things. And that's why also, especially for the climate issue, there is no easy answer, there is no silver bullet. So pausing, reflecting on everybody's own actions, on how we connect, how we engage with others, is probably closer to a solution than if I would herald some specific technology or one single behavior. It will just not be the solution.
Yeah. In a way, each one of us react differently and have to choose differently. And I think this is what's quite phenomenal, as you've already said. So it's a difference. So I want to come over to Lucas. Lucas, you said at the beginning that, in a way, those 2 days were just perfect for your process because you were just given a whole lot of things to absorb. So what happened after that day? And tell us a bit about your piece.
I felt like I finished those days with many pages of notes on strong possibilities for the piece. And I found myself kind of trying to choose which ones would be fitting to what I wanted to do or what I felt like I needed to do. But I felt also at the same time that the biggest impression I had from these 2 days was this confrontation between the media scientists use to communicate those things, and the media that the artists do. And I just felt like there was an urge from the scientific side to present the data. So people need to get to know that. And I questioned myself on whether or how or if was possible to convey that. Of course, for my way of presenting ideas, I felt like, okay, I cannot just show up on stage and present data for this project. Maybe for another one, yes.
You could have.
I could, but I didn't feel that was the point, because also the point, that the most confronting point is sometimes presenting data, it doesn't generate empathy. So it doesn't matter how much I present the data if I'm not allowing people to understand how it feels, to be involved in that, or how it will feel if we go through that. And then thinking about that and revisiting the notes, I thought that a good path would, I mean, there was a logic in the discourse that I find very interesting. And I think it's related to the idea of hope, which is we were presented with a lot of data, which was always showing a very dark possibility of the future. But at the end of it, there was, but we're not there yet.
Yeah.
But we will be there if we don't do anything. So that was basically the logic of the discourse. And I thought I could just borrow that logic. And then revisiting the notes, I felt like there was one concept that I felt that really kind of translates that logic, which is the concept of the point of no return, which is, okay, we are presenting all this, let's say, not very beautiful future possibilities, which we will go through if we pass the point of no return. But we don't need to. There's still a possibility of not crossing the point of no return.
Yeah.
That's basically how I named the piece after. And that's how basically I also structure the piece. So my piece is an exploration on how things would feel like once we pass the point of no return. But at the end, we say, but we haven't crossed it yet.
There yet.
There's a possibility. So basically I structured the piece in that way. And so, okay, then I had that structure to work with. So I was very convinced about that. And then I was walking back to notes and ideas and trying to understand how I could visually portray that. And in the research, I just felt like there was a strong possibility on talking about the seasons of the year, because the changes of the season of the... So you can portray various different changes once we pass the point of no return. Yeah, it's very visual how they change, and also thinking on summer or winter, and winter, the changes that operate are also visually very strong and very different between each other. So I just felt like dividing the piece in 4 parts and then exploring how those parts would not look like, but feel like once you cross the point of no return. So that's this. So these layers are kind of the structure of the piece. So I structured the piece in 4 parts. And let's say the 3 first parts are an exploration on how those 3 first seasons of the year feel like once we cross the point of no return. And then the last part is not really a portrait of how we would feel like, but a portrait that, okay, before I get to the end, I just want to share that there's a chance that we don't have to go through that.
So the relief at the end,
Yeah.
that it is possible. We cannot get to the point. Now, you had your rules, you had your structure. I like how you both use these words. You're talking geometry. I'm really curious what you're going to do now here, sir. So tell us about your process and how you came from that workshop and what you did.
Yeah, it's an interesting, there's a common denominator here. And what's very nice, which you're not aware of, but I mean, we had these 2 days together, but then we've each gone in our own separate directions. We haven't been having daily conversations about our concepts or how things are developing. Yet the common denominator here is hope. I had the same thing. I did struggle, as I said, after these 2 days with trying to, it felt very much like oil to water. It takes me a long time. Well, it took me longer on this process than normally. I need a hook for a concept. And once I have that, I can go very fast. And until I have that, it feels somewhat slippery. And I was sliding a little bit. And you left me a wonderful book. You left a nice gift at the Opera House, Ministry for the Future. So I was in Greece on a beach reading that the summer after these 2 days. And still, I struggled, and then I realized, I looked at the notes, I looked at the data, I went to everything, and I realized that actually what I'm struggling with can be solved right in front of my face. It's been there all the time, the butterfly effect. And I think sometimes we feel as individuals we don't have a great voice, but actually with a small army behind you, or the ricochet effect that can come from maybe not 1, 2, 5, 10, where that can go. And I thought, okay, this is something I can work with. How, especially working with the junior ballets, or there's some dancers here, like the power of our youth and how loud the voices can be, and how we rely on the voices of today to make the change for tomorrow. I was inspired by that. So I've also have a piece in 4 parts. And we found this text with my composer from Rumi, and it just felt very fitting. It says, sit, be still, and listen, because you are drunk and we're at the edge of a cliff. And I thought that this text, and it goes on, but I thought it was quite fitting for, in order to make change, it maybe starts with a little bit of convincing to change ways, to change that flight to a train, to change many things. So I divided the piece into 4 parts, which I'm calling Tomorrow. If nothing changes, it's the path we are going on, it's the data. And it was funny, it's quite a dystopian world. It's very harsh, and it's interestingly enough, as we were creating it, the LA fires were happening at the same time, and it kind of felt like that, which is awful.
Yep.
And then I went backwards to the section I'm calling Yesterday, and it's really a duet of a convincing nature. In order to make change, it's one has to convince somebody to do that. And then the third section, which I'm calling today, is the butterfly effect. It's a piece a section which starts with one person, and it's quite a section in unison, and 1 becomes 2, becomes 5, 7, and then the mass of the company sort of driving forward. It's a bit like a protest. And I was very inspired by the dancers in the studio and the power that they can generate. And so it really does become this mass. And then it ends with the hope version, Tomorrow version 2. And it's just a section of freedom. And what that could potentially look like. Doesn't mean it's easy. There's still a bit of grit in there. But yeah, so I've kind of gone down that path.
Thank you. It's really great. I mean, again, we reiterated this, but the Seed was a 2-day workshop above Zurich and Villa Haut, and the 3 of you have interpreted it in such different ways, but the message you've taken away is the hope, and this is what. So how did this interaction with David and Sonia, what did that change for you, or a view for you? Because scientists are not always the easiest persons to interact with. I mean, except David's are super nice, and Sonia's super nice, but dancers aren't always the easiest either. So, and choreographers also, I mean, like you said, busy lives. And so has something shifted through this interaction in some way for any of you?
I think it's tell the quote again, sit, be still and listen. I mean, it's partly that. It's the time. Taking 2 days is, for me, quite a lot.
It's a luxury for any of us.
To sit, be still and listen was the first, and be provoked. And then hold on to what you or I, speaking for myself, holding on to what I know I can do, which is tell a story from my inside to communicate to other people. Because I think that was something else I heard from the scientists, was people are not receiving receiving this information in large enough numbers. We need to speak these messages in different languages, and dance is a different language. And so I had to be provoked and then kind of go back into my shell and find my language to speak the things that I was feeling after those 2 days.
No, that's great. I think 2 days for probably anyone in this room, any of us, is an investment, right? I mean, truly. And I think that's what's also impressive also for us. And to think that's an investment in this communication, the urgency, the need, the importance of making choices. I think that's a very interesting and important one. What about you guys? Anything else to add to that? So any changes in your attitudes towards?
It was all so new for me, but what I took, especially I remember Sonia was next to me like, hearing the speed at which she was going to get this information out. I felt like a power bank just trying to download all the information.
Yeah, you're not the only one who.
But what was behind that? What was behind that speed was the critical passion, like the need and urgency to get this information out immediately. And then it felt like a great weight of responsibility in order to take that, and how can we transmit that in our world to a public. So I felt a great. I took all of that care to the greatest degree, and being provoked and being overwhelmed and all of that stuff. It is all there in the work. So all of it. There wasn't the good, the bad, the ugly. I mean, it was all fascinating, and yeah.
That's great.
But the care.
Great. Lucas, anything to add?
Yeah, I think for me, I just got out of this 2 days very sensibilized by. I mean, in these times of being so much information going on from different sources and different media and everywhere, just the privilege of being able to be there, listening and discussing specific topics with very graduate specialists or very graduate teachers, and how many students would die to be there discussing those topics with those teachers. It just felt like, okay, that was a very special moment, and instrumentalized my research in a way that I could never have done it by myself. So that was for me the most special and changing.
Well, thanks, Lucas. I really appreciate that. That's respecting that time and that moment, and the privilege which we have to be able to do that. So, David, so I'm going to ask everyone in the room if you have questions very soon, because as I said, I could keep going with these guys forever. But and then if you have a question, then yeah, there's one up there. I have a card coming up there. Anyone else have a question? You put your hand up, and a card will come to you. You can write it down. I'm going to bring it up. David, okay, what about you? I mean, those 2 days, you haven't seen the pieces yet. I have. You're going to be there on Sunday. So I'm going to ask you an unfair question. And his camera's right here. That's what I'm looking at you guys. So what are you going to be looking for on Sunday? Unfair question, I know.
First, I mean, no. I'm extremely curious to start with. And then I have to say one thing. It was fascinating at lunch in Villa Hut. Each of the three choreographers briefly explained a bit their approach. It was so diverse that we quickly realized it's really, we have to build bridges, and it's not that basically the piece will be conceived in these 2 days. So it's, for me, also because you shared, is it more some are more on the rules, some are more on kind of the boundary conditions, or having a kind of almost a bit of a story already to see how this unfolds. I'm extremely curious. What I'm going to take away from it is very likely not the movements to repeat, right? But also not only the core, say, message to take, but to figure out a ways to bring something across in a novel fashion. And could we then translate that in other spaces? So instead of explaining something, make people feel. And not feel because they join a workshop and do the movements. That makes no sense with professional ballet. But the way you can convey something that within the spectator, it starts to change a little bit, possibly, the way people perceive things. And that's what I'm going to kind of listen to, or kind of try to condense a little bit. But I just, at the end, I'm really curious and open, and just want to see how that plays out.
Yeah, well, me too. This can be great. You know, one of the things that I'm on the board of a project called the Climate Music Project, which is another thing, which was this an extension of it. It was a dream come true, because the Climate Music Project was bringing climate scientists, composers, and performers together. It started in San Francisco about 10 years ago, actually, trying to how do you make these changes to our planet visceral, because they're so intellectual. And then the idea of adding a dimension to it was another dimension was for me. So, and how do you embody these movements? So on the pieces on Sunday, is there something you would like for us, in addition to feeling into them and observing, is there something you would like for us to look for? Is there a certain aspect you say, this is this, check this out? Or is there something?
Ooh, that's hard.
Ethan, you look like you've got something on the tip.
I have a fun fact.
Okay, yeah, give us something
I'll
fun.
give you a fun fact. So we have a wonderful costume designer, Louise Flanagan, who created the costumes for all three works. A fantastic human. And
I think she's here.
where?
Yay!
Hi, Louise. I was going to give a fun fact about our fabric. So she's done a fantastic job also about sustainably resourced materials, and she really went far and really has done the best to respect the project. And we wanted to have some little subliminal messages in there that, as a public, when you come, you may not even see, but our fabric is cut from a big. It's a heat map of the world that's been printed, and so each dancer has a little part of this heat map.
That's a good
Isn't that
fact.
great? So we have that's a fun
And the
fact.
fabric is made from
Louise, take the mic.
recycled plastic bottles.
There you go.
That's for Ethan's piece.
Yeah.
That's for Ethan's.
So I think it's really interesting. Louise has taken different approaches to sustainable costume design in each piece. So some of them, the Opera House has a huge stock of fabric, bits that get left over from other productions and so on. So for my piece, I think that each dancer is in black, but apart from one, but each has their own design, which means, and with different fabrics. So we could take bits of leftover fabric from this production or other bits from there and create something that looks like one design, but it's actually using the sort of cut-offs from lots of other pieces.
Cool.
And I think also you've got all sorts of leftovers or old costumes and things they've dyed with special dyes that are use use more water but less chemical.
I have no idea.
There was detail.
Did we get it right?
There was a lot of detail.
Yeah.
I think Louise is she's actually a designer that I've been interested in working with for a while, and you, I think, have worked with her before.
Me too.
But just when I was conceiving this project with you, she wrote me an email and told me about a paper that she'd been researching about sustainable costume. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's perfect. So she's been the perfect designer on this production. And the other thing about the set, because obviously there's a set design as well. And one of the things that Jörg Zielinski, who designed the set, wanted to do was make each set fit into a suitcase.
Yes.
So that it's much easier. It doesn't take huge transport. Because we will tour to Baden as well. And you never know, maybe further afield at a later date. But
Hopefully.
So they're not giant things, and they're all...
It was quite fun because on Saturday he was very proud.
Well,
I failed a little bit, but it's rented.
Yours is a rented.
It's
And it
rented.
fits it, yeah.
And it does fit into it.
Yeah.
He was very proud when he told me that he could.
Yeah.
Your piece, we can put it in a small suitcase.
Yeah.
He didn't say, it's this big. He was so proud. I thought it was really great.
Yeah.
To be challenged with this is a kind of mindset change, your mindset awareness. How can we challenge ourselves? If we don't challenge ourselves, we never achieve that. That is really cool. So here's a couple of really good questions. And I think, if I may, to both of you, for all of you, what exactly overwhelmed you or provoked you concerning the facts and the reality we're in? Was there some specific part, or was it just these graphs, just kind of like that, or what do you recall?
Well, numbers overwhelm me in general.
Just in general.
Having said that, we've got so many counts in this ballet. Maybe that was a response as well. But it's the imagination. It's imagining the scale of the problem and what could happen. Like it's just such a feat of imagination to put yourself, unfortunately, not that far forward in time to imagine what the impact
So it was just really the realization of some of the realities of the impacts that was sort of that's overwhelming. And you're like, what about you guys? What was there something very
I think
specific?
similar, and
Similar, all three.
Just the speed at which it's happening.
Yeah.
And the vast magnitude of it all was just, the world is going down and we're all going down with a ship.
I mean, we were looking at a graph today again for the program heft, and it's sort of got the year from year 0 to 2000, and it goes like that for kind of ages. And then all of a sudden you get to 2000 and it's up
Right.
here. All of a sudden. And yeah, to get that in your brain. And I think I feel overwhelmed when I feel powerless.
Yeah.
And that takes a grip. We are not powerless, but you have to kind of find...
I think it's a transition from powerless to empowered.
Yeah.
Which is probably really a crucial one. And then this question was from a self-critical scientific storyteller, just so you know who that came from. So thank you, self-critical. So then today we've heard about how the artists have interpreted and integrated the data. I'd like to know how the scientific community can learn more, develop new ways of communicating this infamous data. Advice, or what is Lucas? You're
I think that has a lot to do with the thoughts I was having, and a lot to do with the media thing. And just referring back to the previous question, for me it was mostly to do with, I acknowledge all these numbers, but I just don't see how we can make justice to what is expected from our side. It was just like, I understand it all. I just don't see how I can communicate all of that in my piece. So sometimes it's not about it from my perspective, and from my perspective in my specific craft. And I only speak for myself here, but sometimes it's not about how much and how urgent it is, but it's trying to understand what actually touches people. And I think that has a lot to do with the way I think what I do, which is what do I need to do in order to capture the emotions of the biggest amount of people towards a direction that I might be interested in, which is a very difficult question. And it's a very open and broad topic. But for me, it's less about closing and being very specific about what it is and what will happen and why and how many and how much. And it's more about, okay, how sometimes only one thing is enough to sensibilize people to this topic. And then once someone is touched by this topic, then they do the work themselves. They will research by themselves. That's my,
It's very interesting because you made a statement earlier, said what I felt I wanted to do, and then what I needed to do. It's very interesting because you said those both, what I wanted to do and what I needed to do. And I think that's in communication. That's always a very interesting thing for choreography. How do you react to that statement? What I want to do, what I need to do, in order to get a feeling, get a movement, get something across. Do you think about that as well?
Yeah, I mean, so we talked about rules. I made myself rules. Yeah. You had structures.
No, and there's a circle here that I've never been aware of before. Now I'm aware.
The thing is that you make them in order to break them. So a choreographer, actually Kim Brandstrup, who created Of Light, Wind and Waters that we're currently performing, I danced to him many years ago. And when I was a dancer, he told me it's always easier to start with something. So he'd give us anything in order to get all the dancers in front of him moving. And then he could say, no, you stop, or you do that lower or higher or slower or whatever. And I think I needed to create a structure that logically responded to the information we'd been given. But at the end of the day, I did the end of the piece on stage. What I didn't mention was there's a swing. So there's a swing at the back. That's the bit of the set that fits into the suitcase. And there's one man who's swinging throughout, which is a bit like a time pendulum thing that goes with the time idea. But it also says something that is inexplicable about childhood. And it's so interesting to see it on stage. It's been on stage, we've had rehearsals. All of the technicians want to try it out. Everyone just goes to the swing and sits on it. And it brings out something of the child in us. That's not scientific, I don't think. That's just innate. And I think the image of having this sort of increasing need, greed, whatever, in front, and then just having this man swinging, and then eventually he gets off and dances to this music that's very calm, with this unanswered question expressed musically without words. And there's a poem, but I won't go into that. You have to, the want and need, in the end, it's the same thing. You want to express the thing that's in your stomach. And you need to do that by listening to the thing that's in your stomach and just not worrying if it's not the right information exactly.
Yeah.
That's what we do, I think, as artists, is we have to follow our instinct. So you take in information and then follow what it's done to you and try and open that out.
That's really cool. Thank you. David, I want to ask you, as a scientist, yes, also, but you're also a musician, I know. So you're a multifaceted Renaissance man, being in Venice. What you felt you wanted to do, what you need to do, you've heard our choreographers talk a little bit about sort of that inside out. You work with data. How do you react to this? How do you bring these two together for me somehow?
I think what really intrigued me and also was always a bit back of my mind is what's my role? How can I contribute most? By no means by designing the piece, by no means doing any of the arts and crafts on the stage side of things. So also in science communication, it's not necessarily the researcher who has done the data analysis, basically even conceived the methods, probably the theories behind it, is the best communicator. So then you have to find ways to link with those who are either better equipped to do so or have another level or another type of credibility with a specific audience. For example, I worked for many years in the financial sector. I was still often perceived as being a scientist because I had a physicist background. And sometimes, especially when he was heading sustainability in a large company, I often made sure somebody else who has the street credibility of a businessman brings the message across. And in a genuine fashion, so nobody could even imagine it spurred from a conversation the two of us had together. So it's genuinely the message of the CEO by the time he spoke about these things. And that's often very powerful. And I think some scientists are good at that, and they also know how when to step back. And others, it's not always easy to not be in the limelight. But I think if you want to bring change about, you have to be extremely cautious about what's your role and where it ends and where is somebody taking on and basically brings to the next stage. And that's something, these conversations reminded me again, where are these connecting points and how you make sure that the message does get across and it comes back to you in a fashion you've never even imagined. And that's the beauty of art.
Yeah. And it's also quite interesting because different audiences will receive things different ways. And this is what's so fascinating about what we've done together. And speaking of that, you have 14 amazing humans who've been working with on this together. How have they reacted and what's been their reception to the choreography?
Do you want to say anything, Alyssa?
Wait, come on, you got to stay. Come on. Don't be shy.
Come.
Here we go.
I'll put
No. Kathy.
Shuffle up. We'll go like that.
Yeah, you can see.
Now we're going to need a microphone. Here we go. I knew he would bring one. Look, these guys are great. Here we go. So who are you? Just talk. Just talk. It'll go.
Hi.
Try. Keep going.
I'm Alyssa. Yes, I'm a dancer in this program, and I think, we had to put it together pretty fast, and I feel that it was almost, as a dancer, just in my experience personally, it became heavy, like physically and mentally, you know, trying to explain ego and greed and time. You know, it's not like I'm explaining like a princess story, you know? I was like, oh, this is real, you know?
It's real stuff.
And it took me a while, but I almost had to flip my mindset a bit and see the beauty of like how much these choreographers have put into, you know, researching everything and trying to pour all these things that they've learned into these 3 pieces. And so it became less about like how I'm taking on this information and more like how can I lay this story out and do kind of my job of, you know, making the audience feel, as we said. So, yeah.
So that's great. Thank you. So when you've talked a lot about hope
Yes.
and the 3 different pieces, and you're dancing all of them.
Yes.
They're very different.
Yes.
And your colleagues within that, do you feel, when you look at the future, do you look at it with despair, with hope, a little mix of both? How do you see that? Because they went through a process.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't go through the same process. We kind of heard, you know, from their processes. But I mean, I do see hope. It's, you know, we haven't gone through the same information and things laid out in front of us. But yeah, I think it was a big learning lesson for us as well of like kind of a reality check of what's going on.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's really cool. Well, it's really wonderful that you're doing this. I can't wait to see you on stage when it goes. This will be really fantastic. Let me see if there's another question for the Junior Ballet. Here we go. This isn't here, this is my question, but when you talk to your friends about this piece, who are not dancers, how would you describe them?
That's a good question.
That's why they pay me the big bucks here, you know. It's free, but you know, whatever.
I mean,
Gotta hold it a little closer.
sorry. They are all different, but I think, you know, if I'm going in depth and explaining each piece individually, I mean, we do have to explain, you know, in one piece, as you guys have heard, the time and the greed and all of this, but we also have to show the difference between that and at the end, the hope part of it. And I don't know if Kate also wants to touch on this.
Describe the different physical styles, because that's something we haven't talked about,
Yeah.
which is quite...
So the first piece is Kathy's piece, and we're in point shoes for this. So, I mean, I wouldn't say any of them are too classical ballet, but kind of the dancing style for this one is, the point was to really push our physical limit. So, I mean, we are running, we are jumping, and it's getting faster and faster. And, you know, this is, yeah, exactly. Definitely challenging, but it's good. And so that's kind of the physical style for this one. And then for Lucas's, it's more, there's really a story behind this and kind of like a coming together of the group. And I think there's also different styles within that. So there's times where we're being pretty still and just moving from position to position. And then there's times where we really let go and we're dancing as big as we can. And I think that's beautiful. And then in Isan's, I think it's been a really fun challenge for me. The way that we do this movement, it's very textured and it's as big as you can, but also as sharp as you can. And that's
a lot
been
of weight
really nice.
exchange.
Yeah.
I'm amazed to see you all doing this sort of weight exchange partnering, which...
Very new to me. I've had a lot of challenging times, but great times. Yeah, that's been nice.
So every choreographer wants to know that piece was challenging and I loved it and I got it. And thank you for pushing me to my edge and beyond. Yes, that's really great.
It's also, I think, one of the things that I see in the challenges that you've faced is how important it is to come together and encourage one another.
Definitely.
And that ultimately, I suppose, is the point of the message behind the whole program as well, is what the impact that we could have together is much more than the sum of it. It's bigger than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've come to the end of our hour. It's come by in a rap. Stay here, don't move. Sit, be still, and listen. The lesson for today and also for the future, relying on the voices of today. They're the loud ones, and you're inheriting what we create. Past the point of no return, let's hope we don't get there, and the unanswered questions. I think that is what, for me, is a very beautiful thing to end with, is there are many questions which we cannot answer, and there are many which we can, but it's up to us to search. I would like to thank all 5 of you, David from Venice, and our wonderful, wonderful guests here in Zurich, for being with us and for this piece, to doing this together. It is a thrill, and thank you for being here tonight. And thank you for choosing to be here with us. Afterwards, we have an apéro outside. So let us thank our guests with a nice round of applause.
And thank you.
Thank you, David.